tuning in to Speak Out World, artists, activisms, and more. I'm your host, Jewel L.
And I'm your host, Dino L. And we have an interesting show today, Jewel. We're speaking to members of the Sistah Scribes Writers Group about their new book, Shaking Off the Dust. It's a personal narrative of triumph.
Dino, I cannot wait. Now, the book is filled with short stories of overcoming adversity that many face every day. And I'm sure both women and men will be able to relate to their stories. We have a lot to talk about today, so don't go away. We'll be right back with more Speak Out World. Start off with this quote today to describe today's topic and the wonderful women that we have on the show. Today's quote is, "Your testimony is the story of your encounter with God and what role He has played throughout your life." And so today we have the wonderful authors of the book, Shaking Off the Dust. And they are here to talk about the book, the stories that they contribute to it, and how it can inspire us as we start the new year off. You know, sometimes you just need to know that there's somebody else out there that can relate to you. I'd like to welcome our guests. We've already had her on our show once. Reverend Angela Harrington Rice, and we have with us also Reverend Marsha White Laster. And one of the other authors joining us, Patricia Desamore, along with Angela Vicente Bramwell. Let's see, any other guests that I missed coming up to share their wonderful story. And wait now, I can't forget the MA counselor and certified spiritual counselor that's on the show, Miss Cheryl Johnson. Welcome to Speak Out, ladies. It's so great to have you here to talk about your new book, Shaking Off the Dust.
And it's great for us to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to be transparent because, you know, this is the first time that we've had so many guests on the Speak Out World show. So we will be sure to address your name before we throw out the question so we can make sure and let our audience know which guest is actually speaking and sharing their stories, okay? So before we get started, I'll let Dino L., our handsome host, kick off with the first question for you beautiful ladies today.
I'm going to start with Patricia Desamore. Can you tell us about your book entitled All About Me to Fulfill a Class Assignment? Because you wrote this book, you said, in third grade. So I want to know more about, is this where you were inspired to begin your writing career?
Oh, yeah, it actually was. When I was a little kid, I always had a big imagination, and I was really fortunate that I had teachers who encouraged me to write. And I didn't even remember that book when my parents were moving from their house to a smaller place. My sister came upon it and gave it to me. I'm so glad they had saved it. It's like 50 years old. But it was literally my first book.
Wow. We had Angela Rice on our show previously, and we touched a little bit about this book, and she shared with us how you all came together. So in case anyone missed that show, which you need to go back and hear, but in case anyone missed that show, Angela, tell us how you all first came together as a group to write this book, which is your second book, Shaking Off the Dust.
Well, we came together. We're a writing group. We started, I think, in 2011. we came together. Well, one of our members of the writing group suggested to start a writing group. And so we came together one time and then nothing happened. And then in 2014, we started to invite more people to the group. And so we were going along, meeting at each other's homes and sharing ideas about what we wanted to write. We talked about what we were working on, the ideas we had, but we became more of a social group than a writing group. And then we were inspired by one of our members. She kind of forced us. She kind of gave us a dare. She said, I've been in other writing groups and they publish books, and nobody in our group has published anything. And we just come together and we eat and we talk and we don't do anything. So finally, we came up with an idea to actually work on a book together. And so magically we began writing. We would come and we really would have done work. And so that's how Shaking Off the Dust came into being, was because nobody was writing. We had to figure out a way to be consistent writers. And so we came up with the idea of working on a book together. And so that's the origin of Shaking Off the Dust in a kind of nutshell.
All right. Well, we from Dino's question, we learned that Pat started hers off early with her book. She had a jump start, maybe from the rest of you all. But Reverend Marsha Laster, tell us a little bit about your story and your contribution to this book, Shaking Off the Dust.
Well, the chapter that I wrote is called Our Brother's Keeper. And it was written about my brother, Stephen, who passed in 1982. And he was killed by police because he also was a person who was suffering and dealing and living courageously with schizophrenia. And he had done very well with it and had been able to finally, I'm making this very short because I want everybody to read it, he'd finally been able to go back and finish college, and he was working on his master's and PhD at Stony Brook College, a joint program, when he died, when he was killed. And so the story is about his struggle with schizophrenia, but more importantly, about how his life was cut short when he had gotten through that challenge and was living his life. So it's really about that, but more than that, it's about how my family and myself were able to heal from that tragedy, and were able to go forward with love, understanding that we all had work that we still needed to do, but we certainly had healing that needed to take place. So this chapter talks about how I was able to shake off the dust of his untimely ending.
Wow. Let's go to Miss Cheryl Johnson. Tell us about your contribution to the book, Shaking Off the Dust.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I came across the group when I went to Reverend Angela Rice's book launch for her first book. And she talked about the group at that point in time. And writing is something that I've always wanted to do. I've always had a desire to do it. And it's been one of those things where I felt like life gets in the way and you don't get to do what you really want to do. So when I went to this book launch, I felt like, well, this is an opportunity for me to really start doing what I want to do, which is writing. So as the idea for Shaking Off the Dust came together and we were talking about what parts of our lives we wanted to write about, the first thing that came to my mind was my mother and growing up with my mother, because my mother was a wonderful, extraordinary woman who suffered from what we call back then manic depression, which what we now know as bipolar syndrome. So it was a roller coaster ride of growing up with her. but she's my muse. She was the reason why I decided that I wanted to share that part of my life in my writing with the group. So it's been a real privilege, a real process, a real journey, but I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Miss Pat, tell us about your story in the book, Shaking Off the Dust.
Yes, well, mine is entitled An Unexpected Education. And it's really just the story of how I basically changed careers and got into, something I was aligned with what I do. I'm a journalist, but was different because it was communications. And just trying to become a part of the culture. And it was very difficult. It was I would call it a closed culture. It was not nurturing. And I had been used to that really my whole career. And it was a pretty high profile job. So there were many challenges, but in the end, I think what I really learned about overcoming that challenge was to really be true to myself and to really believe in myself. It actually, as I was going through it, I was challenged many times. Often I would say, wow, am I good enough to do this? Can I really do this? And the answer really was yes. I did a great job, and that, bore out in the end. But while I was going through it, it was difficult because there wasn't a lot of support. And it was like being in a foreign place. So this is really about, like I said, being true to myself and really understanding my power, my gift, my blessings, I'll even say, because it was an unexpected education. And I think I just grew stronger and my life really grew richer for having gone through that experience. But it took me a while because it hurt and it was tough to get over.
Wow.
So, Miss Johnson, or Reverend Johnson, I apologize. Can you explain your section of the book, My Mom, My Life, A Healing Journey?
Well, I chose to talk about what it was like growing up with my mother. It was always such a roller coaster ride. I had a younger brother. I was the oldest of the two, and we had a very interesting upbringing. My mother's people were from Boston, Massachusetts. My father's people were from Birmingham, Alabama. So in growing up, I had a wide spectrum of the country, and I spent time in both areas. But growing up with my mother was an extraordinary experience because it was like you never knew what was coming. You became immune to embarrassment because she would do things or say things that you would just say, wow, how could that even come out of your mouth? But on the other side of the same coin, she was an engaging woman. She loved conversation. She loved people. And people were drawn to her. So it made for a very interesting life experience. I've been thinking about writing professionally since the 1980s. And when I first began to think about it, it was because I had left a job that I worked with the city of Atlanta, and I was involved with the missing and murdered children's crisis.
Oh, wow.
So when I stepped away from that job, I decided, you know what, I don't want another 9 to 5. I want to do something else that's going to, engage my creative talents, whatever they are, if they're there. And so I've been thinking about writing for a long time, but it was just a matter of, essentially the stars lining up and things all being put together. I would refer to it as divine order. But I think that's why we got together to write our story, because they're all so different, but relatable.
Yeah, and I want to say that one of the reasons that Sistah Scribes, her writing group, was started was to be that place where women who wanted to write could come together and support each other and to hold each other accountable. So the group is really open to anyone who wants to join the group. There is no fee for joining the group. It's just that if somebody wants to write a book or write a short story or want to commit to creating a writing life, that they can join Sistah Scribes and come on. Our writing group is different from the publishing group. So anyone can be a part of the writing group. They can go to our website at sistahscribes.com. We'll be meeting the third Sunday of each month on Zoom at 3 p.m. and they can come, tell us what they're working on, and we will support their efforts. And they'll be like Cheryl and Marsha and others who are now published writers. So we try to make people's writing dreams come true. Yeah.
Right.
That is awesome, because with starting off the new year, so many people want to be able to tell their stories. I mean, and there are so many stories from 2020 alone of people overcoming heartbreak and losing loved ones and losing jobs. And so to be able to find the courage to put that find a safe place to be able to bring the stories out of them of what they've been through. This is probably on someone's list. And for what Angela Rice just said for the website, I just want to let you all know is Sistah, Sistah, Scribes, Scribes.com. And so you can go on our podcast on our website to get more information, so that if you want to join, you can. You all are such an amazing group of women. I mean, educated, degreed, all of that. I want to know, Pat, for you, like, what was it like coming together to be able to just really share your story? Because as a writer, you have to go back and revisit all those memories. So I'll start with Pat, and then I'll go to Reverend Marsha Laster to talk about what the writing process was for you to have to revisit those memories to put it all in this book.
That's such a great question, because it was hard. It was very difficult and emotional in many cases. And there was so much resistance. I mean, it actually took 2 years to tell that story, and it's not that many words, but it was like reliving different parts of it again and again. And sometimes I would try, but I just couldn't write. So it was a cathartic, really emotional experience, but it was just straight joy when I actually got to the end.
Well, for me, it's different for everybody, but I think what's similar for all of us is we all had to go back and dig up some memories that were not always pleasant. Even if we had gone through it and felt healed from it, by reopening all of the incidents, you're almost reopening a wound, so to speak. So for me, when I was writing it, it was interesting. I didn't have difficulty in writing it. But when I went to the editor, because of course we all work with an editor or editors, when I went to see the editor and she would ask me a question about why I wrote it this way, or maybe this word would be better, how we work with editors. I remember then when I had to explain and talk about it, because it was based on how I felt about the situation, then it was extremely emotional. As long as I was typing on the computer, it was not emotional. It was matter of fact. And I felt healed.
Wow.
Once I had to speak about it, it's interesting how your voice gives rise to your emotions. Then it became emotional. But it was very healing at the same time, almost like a second healing. So I'm grateful to have had that opportunity to express it and to be able to share it with others, particularly because at this time that we've seen so much political unrest and unrest towards difficulty towards the mentally ill and also towards Black citizens, the story of my brother is very poignant now and very much up to date, very much what we're living through again and have been living through.
Reverend Johnson, let me ask a question. As a certified spiritual counselor and an ordained minister, tell us how you are ministering to people now in the age of COVID-19? I know you're raised in New York, so I know you know how to talk to people, but how do you minister to them when they're going through some of these experiences that they're doing now through COVID?
Well, that's a great question, because I think what we're finding in this time of COVID is that, first of all, we all have to minister to ourselves to keep going. And then we have to minister to people in any way that we can find. I have always thought of myself as an intuitive counselor. I'm not, if you want to talk to me about things going on in your life, I'm not going to solve your problems, but in listening to you and talking with you, I might be able to help you open up and see some things in a different light, or see them as you've never seen them before. So I've always been a people person. I've always been prone to counseling, and I think that all of the experiences in my life have led up to me understanding that we all have ministries, whether we have that title or not. We're all ministers. We're all ministering to some form of God's creation, be it people or animals or whatever it is. And I'm grateful to have the opportunities that I've had in my life to be able to reach out and touch people. I'm very grateful for that.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Angela Rice, this is not your first book. Tell us about your story that you contribute to Shaking Off the Dust, and then I want to get to the second Angela that's guest on our show too, to talk about her story.
The name of my story is Jack Rabbits Don't Drive Cars. And the story begins with me recounting a conversation I had with my grandmother when I was a little girl. And I love babies. I had so many doll babies, and I love babies. I always wanted to hold people's babies and whatever. And then my grandmother said something to me that says, when you have babies, Jack Rabbits will be driving cars. And so I talk about the pain of not having children. When it was something that I have always wanted. And some of the challenges I've had in terms of that, and what people's impression is of me. You know, I've had people say, "Oh, you're that career woman, you know, put all your emphasis on your career," and not really understanding what I've gone through. And so that's very interesting. And sometimes we do that a lot. We kind of assume what someone's story is. So I share that story of what it meant for me to have children, and what it meant for me not to be able to have children. And so that's, and for me, as Reverend Marsha was saying, you know, sometimes when you're writing, it doesn't come up. But when I had to read the story for the group, it was very hard for me to get through it. You know, but I understand that God has a plan for each of us. And some of us aren't meant to bear children. And maybe that's because we get to, I guess, have children in many different ways. But I believe that we all give birth. I think men, women, all of us give birth to something. We give birth to a movement. We give birth to activism. We give birth to a book. We give birth to a story, to a movie, to a garden. You know,
yes,
we are all producing. So, so this chapter allows me to get to that awareness of what it means to give birth and what God has for each of us.
Yes. Amen, Renaissance woman. Amen.
Ms. Bromwell, as a licensed clinical social worker, have you found it that the COVID-19 era is impacting your writing at all?
I think she's frozen.
Well, I'll put that up for anyone. Has the COVID era impacted your writing as you think about writing and as you think about the situations that families are facing now? How is that impacting your ministries?
Well, I wanted to say that we started writing this book. I don't know, Cheryl, what year was it?
I joined the group in 2018, and that's about the time that we pulled the idea together of writing about personal trauma. Yeah. So it was about a year before anybody ever heard of COVID-19.
Yeah, it took a little while to get it out there, but we can talk to you about publishing in the time of COVID and some of the challenges that we had with our first book, and just publishing with 6 other women. I mean, that was that was interesting as well. So but we got it done. We got it done. Each of us did a little bit. We stuck together. It was a wonderful opportunity to bond as sisters. So,
and the other thing is that the majority of us in the group have a connection to Hillside Chapel and Truth Center under our wonderful spiritual mentor, Dr. Barbara King, who just recently made her transition. But I think it permeates through the group. We have these spiritual principles that we try to live by, and the most important of all being to love yourself and be who you are. And so that's what we have all brought to the table, is that we're all writing our own stories or bringing up chapters. And I think what I found, what was particular, I knew the story in my head, but bringing it out and then sharing it was really a birthing process, to get it out and to have people hear me and to feel like, does this have any relevance to you? Can you understand what it is that I lived through, what I went through? And I feel that in each of the chapters.
And we had I want to just mention our wonderful retreat. I think that was really what really kicked off the idea that this really was going to happen, and real, and that we needed to take it seriously, and that we needed to give it our attention and our time. But we went up into the North Georgia mountains, and we rented an Airbnb for the weekend, and we rode and we read our stories, and we cried together, and we ate together, and we knew at that point that this wasn't going to just be a pipe dream, because I think at some point there was some doubt.
Oh yeah. Several of us tried to get out of the group. It was just like, I just can't do this. I cannot do this. I gotta go.
Yeah, they were coming like, I can't.
Like, no, we've started this. Let's nurture it. Let's keep it going. We're gonna get to the end. And I think we all felt that, but it's a scary process, especially when you're sharing some of your deepest feelings about things that have gone on in your life.
What's next for the group?
Well, the group is going to, we're working on our accountability group, which is every third Sunday at 3 p.m. I mean, that's something that we're still involved in. One of the goals has always been for each person to write their own book. It's not been the book that we wrote together was to inspire people to make a consistent effort to write. But now what we want is Pat to have a book, Marsha to have a book, Cheryl to have a book, Angela to have a book, Imani, who's not here today, to have a book, for all of us to have independent books. So we want everybody to come with this idea of, this is the work that I'm going to do. And what the group does is support you. Listen to your story. Ask you some questions that might give you a little bit more direction. Check to make sure you did right, Pat said it, or just kind of giving you a little urge. I was getting ready to say Pat is good at urging. It's like, what's that? Either do something. We need to see something. So that's what we would like to happen next, for everyone in the group to work on their independent projects. There are two of us in the group that have independent projects, and that's Imani Armstrong, who's not with us today, and myself. But we expect everybody in the group, and anybody who comes in the group, we want them to know that that's their expectation.
It's so inspiring. The fact that, like I said, what it takes as a poet and as a writer and as someone who likes to journal, I mean, it takes a lot to pour into yourself with writing, and then like to actually share it with other people. It takes a lot of courage. I mean, I really take my hat off to you ladies for your courageous stories and sharing that with the world and having a safe space. Like Angela, when you mentioned a retreat, you all came together, you all cried, you all leaned on one another. I mean, using your faith and everything, just the love and friendship among sisters, you brought all that together. And I just really want to, take my hat off to all of you all. As you move forward in this new year, and people read the book, Shaking Off the Dust, folks who want to shake off the dust of 2020, Pat, what do you hope that people will gain from reading your story and other stories in this book?
Well, self-empowerment, I would say, is what I hope people would gain. And I think they will from each of our stories, even though each story is very different. The end result is that you conquered whatever that fear, that challenge was. And it just helps you to be stronger and go on to conquer the next one, because the next one's coming. So I think, self-empowerment would be what I hope people will take away.
I could see how it is therapy for each of you to be able to tell your stories, and knowing that by telling your stories, you're going to help others who are going through similar instances but don't have an outlet. So I congratulate you all for taking on that task. This is a monumental task that you all are taking on right now to write, because many of our kids in elementary school and middle school and high school, they don't have the ability to put pen to paper and write their stories. And there are probably some very interesting stories that are out there, but you're inspiring them by doing what you're doing right now.
Well, I also want to inspire some women, more women and older people and older men, because we go to graves with our stories. And then our children years later start looking for their ancestors, want to know something about their ancestors. When we have the opportunity right now to share our stories with the next generation, we continue to live the same lives over and over and over again. And if you sit down and look at your family history, you will recognize that you see a pattern. And the reason a pattern exists is because nobody tells their story and nobody tells the truth. They try to act like everything was perfect in the past, that there were no problems, and then you see the same thing circulating. So if we could begin to tell our stories so our children and our grandchildren know what our lives were, then I think we will begin to see something different in our community. So for me, this is more than just writing a book to somebody to read. It is about activism and getting people to tell the truth of their lives and recognizing that this is empowering not only for them, but for their families and their communities. So we need to tell the truth, write their stories. Because if you don't write your story, somebody else is going to tell it, and it's going to be all messed up and not right. So we need people to come forward and just do the work.
Yes.
That's my sermon.
And Marsha, what did you want to add to that? Like, what do you hope that there are so many, with the protests of 2020 and to say my name, like, how do you want your story from Shaking Off the Dust to be able to inspire someone else?
I think I would love it to be known. First of all, to go ahead with what Reverend Angela said, I think it's really important for us to understand that our challenges don't come to defeat us. Our challenges come as opportunities for growth, opportunities for healing, opportunities to share, as Reverend Angela is saying, with others. And so I think those experiences, yes, they're unique to you, but you can share them with other people. And so it's interesting, when I wrote that was before the George Floyd incident that sparked all of the furor around the world. But the incident with my brother had happened many decades ago. You know, this has been the story of African American people in this country for years and years. This is not new. So the fact that the story that I wrote is clear when I talked about in the chapter that it happened in 1982, I think that also brings to mind to people that this has happened in 1792. This happened in 1992. This happened in 1982. This continues to happen in 2020. And so it's time for it to be done. So I think it was just a reminder that this is something that is not just new to us now. This is something that as African Americans and people of color, that we've been going through this for quite a while. And it hasn't been just African Americans. This has happened with Native Americans, as we know. This has happened with Asian Americans that came here. So it's just really important for us to embrace our diversity and to know that it makes us stronger as a people and as a country and as humanity. So now I'm off my soapbox. That's basically it. The other thought I've always had was that Shaking Off the Dust, in my mind, kind of reminded me of what was it called? Chicken Soup for the Soul, in the sense that there's so many different books of chicken soup for the soul. Chicken soup for the soul for this, chicken soup for the soul for that. And I thought of Shaking Off the Dust as being a wonderful way for people to, maybe we did another compilation, or other authors did another compilation with our guidance that was Shaking Off the Dust Part 2, because there's so many stories that can be shared. And maybe it's people who come to write with us in our group next that get an opportunity. But there's so many things to do to get your voice heard. As long as it's heard, that's the most important thing.
And that's why we have this podcast. Listen, you ladies have started a movement. You know, you just never know. I might be in that group and throwing up my own little story up in there and push me to do what I need to do as a writer in addition to. And I have so many wonderful women to look to that have inspired me just from this show alone today. And men, Dino, because, you know, there are a lot of things that men need to read about other men and know that, hey, you can overcome things of your past or what have you, and know that you can shake that dust off and move on to something better.
Right. I think one of the things you have to remember with the main theme of our book is triumph. We cover all kinds of different areas, from workplace trauma to car accidents to police violence to mental illness. But at the end of the day, it's all about being triumphant. And that doesn't have a sex to it. We all want to be triumphant. And I think when we were in the early stages of trying to figure out when and how we were going to publish this, that we worried that, you know, oh my God, there's so much trauma going on in the world. But I think the book speaks to the fact that we can all be triumphant, because we are. You're triumphant when you wake up every day. When you feet off the bed, that's triumphant. So that's what we need to focus on, you know, being triumphant.
And we're all going through COVID-19, and we will all be triumphant. So it's the perfect time to look while we're going through this worldwide challenge to know that there is light on the other side. As we say all the time, you can be better or you can be bitter, and we choose to be much, much better.
Exactly.
And the three who have not spoken, Angela has a really great story about the career that Chaos built, and it adds a bit of humor to the book, Angela is Jamaican, so we get to get an insight into Jamaican life. Deanna Parks Jones was in an accident that nearly took her life and did take her life for some moments, and she came back with a new insight on life. So we have somebody who's dealing with out-of-body experience, and
Right.
there's Imani Armstrong, Barbara Armstrong, who talks about sexual abuse, assault. Yeah. So there are many stories, but one of the things, as Reverend Cheryl was saying, we're still standing. There are stories of triumph that we have acknowledged what went on in the past, but we're moving towards the future, and we're sharing these stories to let other people know that they have permission to tell theirs.
That's
right.
right.
You tell your story, you give other people permission. I think about how Oprah Winfrey talked about being pregnant at 13, and other people had an opportunity to say, oh, if she can say that and not be ashamed and not feel guilty, that I have an opportunity too to share my story. So we hope that this will give people courage to share who they are and recognize that it's cathartic and it is a very healing way to move beyond the past.
Mm-hmm.
Well, amen, and pass the plate on that.
And we've had some wonderful reviews. I know Pat has been hearing from people, as well as Marsha and Dr. Johnson, of people reading the book. And I mean, every review I've heard has all been positive.
Right. Right.
Wow. Well, it can't help but to be, because it is, again, a testimony of what God has brought you all through and being triumphant. I mean, so it's encouraging, it's inspiring, and there's so many different stories of like, oh, wow, I can relate to that. Okay, if I didn't know about that, wow, now I can feel that, hear that story and feel that pain, and saw how this person made it through. And listen, we have to have you guys back on Speak Out just to talk to you all individually. This has been a great conversation. I want to just thank you all so much for coming on our podcast and sharing your stories with us. And congratulations once again on the book, Shaking Off the Dust. And listen, be sure, audience, you don't want to miss it. Go to our podcast or go to their website at sisterscribes.com and get the story and start your new year off right. And you may even come out by the end of the year as an author with your own book. Okay?
Ladies, I've really enjoyed this interview. I've really enjoyed hearing from you, your stories, and I'm sure that there are going to be more stories in the future that each of you will be writing in your own individual books. So when you finish your compilation of your books, we want to have you back on Speak Out World so that you can tell your stories.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We'd be honored.
Thank you all so much. And just to let everyone know, Speak Out World Arts, Activists, and More is a production of the Creative Collaborative. So if you'd like to learn more about the podcast, visit our website at sowpodcast.com or follow us on social media. And, we created the Speak Out World platform as for creative individuals to be able to share their stories. So we are very passionate about that. And I just want to remind everyone that you have a voice. So don't be afraid to use it.
Speak out, world.
That's right. Speak out, world. All right.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.